Harry, I need to buy a backpack, new clothes, and school supplies for Tommy. School is starting soon, Riley said, pulling her husband away from the TV.
Well, go ahead and get everything ready. Why do you ask me? Harry muttered, clearly irritated. Listen, I'm already spending a ton of money on you and your demands, Harry said, not hiding his annoyance. And the reason was as timeless as it was predictable. He had grown weary of family life. The daily grind, responsibilities, and obligations felt like a burden. He yearned for a life of ease and excitement, for a woman who looked at him with admiration and desire. And he found her. Evelyn was 14 years younger than him and seemed to love him endlessly, but it was all an act. At 22, she was calculating, cunning and manipulative. As the eldest daughter in a large, poor family, she had learned early on that no one would take care of her but herself. I refuse to spend my entire youth slaving away at a factory like you, Evelyn shouted at her mother at 18, her voice filled with anger. I'll find a rich man who'll treat me like a princess, and I won't set foot in this house again. Evelyn packed her meagre belongings into a sports bag and went to the city. She found a job as an administrator at a fitness club and rented a humble place. One day, a group of women from a company floor above came to their club for yoga lessons, and Evelyn accidentally overheard their conversation. I'm telling you, he got married because she got pregnant, one of the women said. But if you look at the kid, he doesn't resemble his father at all. Yes, Harry is handsome, blonde, has blue eyes, while his son is red-haired, curly, freckled, another woman added. And his wife isn't a redhead, a third colleague chimed in. I wonder what he even sees in her. She's even older than him by a couple of years. He needs a young thing. He'd bloom with someone like that, especially with his money and position. Have you seen how he looked at our new secretary? I think we're going to watch the second act of the opera pretty soon. So, ladies, take your seat and prepare popcorn. The women laughed and left the fitness club, but Evelyn couldn't get this conversation out of her head. Arranging a chance encounter was easy. When Harry finally emerged, she accidentally bumped into him, bursting into tears. Harry caught her, immediately sympathetic. Has someone upset you? Why are you crying? Evelyn sobbed, leaning on his offered arm. My boyfriend dumped me on my birthday. What a jerk! How could anyone hurt such a beautiful girl? Harry exclaimed. You know what? Crying on your birthday is a crime. Let's go celebrate together. I'll make up for someone else's mistake. Oh, I don't know, Evelyn hesitated. But Harry took her by the elbow and led her to the nearest cafe. And Evelyn didn't fail. Using all methods of seduction, she easily dragged Harry to his home. And so, for the past 6 months, Harry couldn't look at his wife without anger and irritation, and Evelyn kept adding fuel to the fire. Harry, I saw your wife with her son, she said, pausing meaningfully and curling her pretty lips. Why doesn't your son look like anyone? Harry shuddered. He had asked Riley this question on the very first day he brought her and the baby home from the maternity hospital. Harry, my great-grandfather was ginger, and the sons were ginger and curly-haired, all covered in freckles. Probably that's why our boy got his hair colour. Harry seemed to believe her then and didn't think about it any more, but sometimes his gaze would involuntarily linger on his son, trying to find any resemblance to himself. He said it was from his great-grandfather, Harry mumbled, feeling like a complete idiot. What else could she tell you? You're so handsome, decent and amazing. The best man in the world. I would also insist that you were the father, if I were in her shoes. But who knows? Maybe you've been supporting someone else's child all these years. Anyway, I'm proud of you. Not every man is capable of that. She pressed against her lover. But people can start laughing at you and your kindness. If I were your wife, you would never suspect me of betrayal. Her cold fingers slipped under his shirt. Harry was already ready for anything for her. So now Harry looked at his wife, and a fresh wave of irritation rose within him. How far is she from Evelyn? Now she'll start asking what to cook for dinner again, and I don't want to answer, eat, or even talk to her. This needs to end. Life is so short, and wasting it on an unworthy woman is akin to a catastrophe. And Harry decided. While Riley and her son were not at home, he brought Evelyn there, very much hoping for her moral support. The apartment belonged to him. Riley moved in already as his wife, so she had no rights to it. Smiling, Riley and little Tommy entered the room and, startled, continued to smile foolishly, only out of inertia. "Tommy, please go to your room," she said, gently turning her son by the shoulders and guiding him toward the door. He didn't argue and quietly left. "What's happening here?" Riley asked, her eyes wide with shock as she looked from her husband to the unfamiliar woman. "I've had enough," Harry declared. "I'm tired of you, your constant questions, your complaints. All I ever hear from you is money, money, money." "But Harry, I never ask you for anything for myself," Riley protested. "Everything I've ever taken is for our son." "Our son?" Harry's eyes narrowed maliciously. "Do you still think I'm an idiot? You used me all these years. Look at him and at me. I am not his father, and it's obvious to everyone." Evelyn smirked mockingly, crossing her legs and looking as if she owned the place. "You won't get another penny from me. Get out of my house and take your brat with you." "And where will we go?" Riley was stunned by such a turn. "Go to the real father of your son, for example, or find another fool to support your son and you. I don't care." A searing insult struck Riley deeply. She could forgive many things, but not her husband's rejection of his own son. "Tommy, pack your things, we're leaving," she said, rushing into the nursery. "Where to, Mum?" The boy had already sensed that something was seriously wrong. Without answering, Riley frantically packed her son's belongings into a large travel bag and thanked fate that it was summer outside. "Mum, where are we going?" the boy asked when they were quite far away from their house. "I don't know, honey," Riley admitted honestly, looking around, and was surprised to find that they had reached the park near the city hospital. They sat on a bench, and only then did Riley fully grasp the absurdity and helplessness of their situation. She had no money to rent a place to live. Her salary hadn't been paid yet, and even when it was, it wouldn't be enough to afford a decent place. Tears began to flow down her cheeks. Caleb left the doctor's office with a heavy heart. A brain tumour. How could that young, well-groomed doctor deliver such news so calmly? Caleb silently scolded himself for his unjustified anger toward the doctor. After all, the man had only delivered the diagnosis and prescribed treatment. The man walked down the steps of the clinic and headed toward his car. His head ached and his palms were cold and sweaty. "Pull yourself together, you idiot," he mentally commanded. He didn't have much time left, and the last thing he needed was to get into an accident and die earlier than necessary. The parking lot was near the park, and as he got into his car, he noticed a woman and a boy sitting on a bench. The woman was crying bitterly, and the boy, who looked about 6, was gently wiping her cheeks and saying something to comfort her. Without thinking, Caleb got out of his car and approached them. "May I help you?" he asked, sitting down next to them. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to bother anyone," Riley said, turning away from him and wiping her eyes. Listen, I can see you're having problems. Maybe I can help you solve them, or at least part of them," Caleb insisted.
"We've been kicked out of our house, me and my son," Riley finally admitted. "My husband brought another woman to our home, said Tommy isn't his son, and kicked us out. And I don't have money to rent even a cheap room. I have no family here. My friend is on vacation, and we have nowhere to go."
She looked at Caleb defiantly, but then softened when she saw his face. It was clear he wasn't feeling well either. Pale, greyish skin, red, inflamed eyes, and beads of sweat on his temples. "Those aren't real problems," Caleb said bitterly. "Let's go. I have a summer house in a suburb. You can stay there for now, and then we'll figure something out." Tommy looked at the stranger intently and said seriously, "What if you're a bad man who kidnaps people to take something from them?" Caleb laughed, and his face briefly regained some colour. "Unfortunately, you don't have anything I need, so there's nothing to fear. Besides, I have a wonderful neighbour there. She won't let me do anything bad." Riley and Tommy exchanged glances and nodded. Half an hour later, they were on the spot. Caleb helped carry their bag and showed them their room. It was spacious and cosy, with expensive, sturdy furniture, quality renovations, a real fireplace and a huge, fluffy rug in front of it. "It's so nice and peaceful here," Riley said with a smile. "Wow, look at all these books," the boy exclaimed, staring at the floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. "May I take one?" "Of course, if you find something you like, go ahead," the owner said, and led Riley to the kitchen. There, he first took some pills and then showed her how to operate the stove and the water heater. "Thank you, Caleb." Riley didn't know how to express her gratitude. "Don't mention it," he said, brushing it off, and left. A few minutes later, Riley saw a folder in the hallway. Michael must have forgotten it. Curiosity overcame her natural modesty, and the guest peeked inside. It was his medical record. Riley looked at the year of birth. The owner of the house was 42, and the folder was thick, full of results of some tests and scans. "Hello, I'm your neighbour, Mrs. Collins. Caleb asked me to check on you and see if you need anything. And I was just going to see your other neighbour. She asked me to do an injection." "What to do?" "Arthritis. It could be quite painful." "Are you a doctor?" A sly thought flashed through Riley's mind. "No, a nurse, retired." The woman laughed. "But do you know anything about this?" Riley brought Caleb's medical record. "Let's see what's in here." The former nurse began to read, but the further she delved, the more her eyebrows fluttered. "Where did you get this?" She looked at Riley intently. "Caleb forgot it when he brought us here," Riley blushed. Relying, she had intruded into someone else's life without permission. Mrs. Collins froze for a moment. "Oh, no," she exclaimed. "He has a brain tumour, malignant, inoperable, and he didn't say anything. Well, we'll talk later. I need to go now." Waving her hands and scolding secretive Caleb, the woman eagerly hurried to her new neighbour. Riley was taken aback. So that explained his pallor and the melancholy in his eyes, and here she was consumed by her own troubles. What a magic situation! Riley felt a deep sense of sympathy for this new acquaintance. There was nothing she could do to alleviate his suffering. The next morning she found a moment of respite, as the weekend had arrived and she didn't have to hurry to work. She had 2 days to ponder her next steps. Suddenly, her thoughts were disrupted by the sound of a motor. The owner had returned. "Good morning." Caleb got out of the car with full bag, smiling. "Here, I brought you some things for now." He entered the house and first, after putting the bag on the table, threw another handful of pills into his mouth.
Riley noticed that Caleb had arrived quite cheerful, with a normal expression, but after taking the medicine, he soon looked exhausted and unwell again. He looked tired. "Caleb," Riley began, deciding to address the situation, "you left your medical records here yesterday. I'm sorry, but I looked inside it. I must admit I didn't understand much, but your neighbour mentioned that you have a grave illness, and here we are, bothering you. I promise I'll try to sort out my problems as quickly as possible."
"Riley, it's true. My diagnosis isn't good," Caleb replied. "Medicine can't do much for me now, and all I have left is to wait for the end. So let me help you while I still have the strength."
"Is this a final diagnosis?" Riley asked. "Have you consulted other doctors?"
"I see no reason not to trust my doctor. He's been treating our family for 3 years. My wife insisted on having a family doctor. It's very convenient. No need to go to the clinic or schedule appointments in advance," Caleb said, his breathing becoming laboured. It seemed he couldn't focus his gaze. Riley grew alarmed.
"Are you feeling unwell?" Riley leaned forward and tried to touch the man's forehead, but he suddenly turned pale and began to collapse to the side, then fell off the chair onto the floor. The ambulance arrived in 15 minutes and the man was taken to the hospital. Only then she noticed the medical history on the table and realised she had forgotten to give the paramedics his medical papers. "What an idiot I am!" she scolded herself. After carefully studying the history, Riley found the name of the doctor and had no trouble finding the clinic where he worked online. "Why am I worried?" she asked herself. "He's already been examined, and besides, his wife knows about it, so she must have done everything she could." But something drew Riley to the clinic. She decided to talk to the doctor. She waited until the neighbour returned and asked her to keep an eye on Tommy. "Of course," Mrs. Collins agreed. "I haven't spent time with children in a while. My grandchildren rarely visit, so I'll enjoy chatting with Tommy." At the clinic, waiting for the doctor to be free, Riley began to look at the visitors. Her attention was drawn to a stylishly dressed woman who entered the clinic briskly, leaving an equally stylish car at the entrance. She asked the administrator something and began pacing nervously back and forth in the hallway, clearly waiting for someone. "Victoria, what are you doing here?" a young man in a white coat asked, looking around nervously. "Carlos, we need to talk, but not in the hallway," the woman said, taking his arm and leading him to the office, where Riley was sitting. They went inside. A minute later the nurse came out with a smirk, not even glancing at Riley, and walked away. But she didn't close the door properly, and Riley could hear the conversation between the strange couple. "Carlos, my husband was taken to the hospital. He collapsed at his summer house. The neighbour called me, but I can't find his medical paper at home. What if he took it with him, and they see it at the hospital?" the woman asked anxiously. "Victoria, why are you panicking ahead of time?" The doctor tried to calm her. "Why would he carry his medical paper with him? And if they come to me, everything will be fine. Here it is, the real papers with the real diagnosis. No one will suspect that there were 2 folders." There was a strange silence. Riley, who had heard everything, felt a chill in her stomach from horror. She stood up and quietly peeked into the slightly open door. The couple was kissing passionately by the window, not noticing anyone else. Riley recoiled and began to frantically think about what to do. It was clear as day. This woman was Caleb's wife, and the doctor was her lover. Riley nervously rummaged in her bag and touched the medical paper, as if afraid it might disappear. The decision came to her naturally. First, she went to the hospital where Caleb had been taken. "Who are you to him?" the doctor asked when she inquired about his condition. "His sister," Riley lied without batting an eyelash. "Your brother has severe intoxication. We found medications he was taking, but we don't know why. Judging by the MRI scans, he's fine. He said he had a malignant brain tumour."
Riley was shocked by the doctor's statement. Who told him that? His family doctor gave him the diagnosis. Riley pulled out the folder with the test results and scans. I made copies. The doctor looked sceptically at the woman sitting in front of him and began to study the folder. I don't understand, he muttered, scratching his chin and looking at Riley again. According to the tests, this should be an old man, 90 years old, almost a corpse, and yes, there is a tumour. But this skull is not Caleb's. Where did you get this? Riley explained that she had learned it from Caleb and that she had overheard it in the clinic. Caleb felt like he was emerging from a fog. The white shroud gradually dissipated and the outlines of objects became clearer. When he fully came to his senses, the first thing he saw was the hospital walls and the drip stand next to the bed. Then his gaze slid across the ward and he frowned again, thinking he was starting to hallucinate. But when he opened his eyes, he realized that he was not imagining it. At the table next to the bed sat a policeman, and at the door was Riley. It turned out that Caleb had been placed in an artificial coma to allow his body to recover after the harmful dose of prescribed drugs. And now, after a week, they had brought him out of the coma. The doctor allowed the police to talk to the patient, but not for long. So, Caleb learned that his wife and the family doctor had been arrested on suspicion of conspiracy to murder. Victoria had come up with the plan when she met Carlos. He was an ordinary therapist in a private clinic dreaming of a beautiful life, and noticed that one of his patients had set her sights on him. Victoria's husband was a successful businessman and could easily afford to support a non-working wife. But she had grown bored in the marriage. When she met the doctor, she fell in love with him. Carlos realized he could take advantage of the situation, and when his lover proposed her plan, he agreed without hesitation. He falsified the results of Caleb's tests, replacing them with the results of a cancer patient. He did the same with the scans, keeping the real test results in his folder. If something happens to him, they will turn to me, but this is the least likely outcome, he explained to Victoria. The main thing is that the fake folder does not fall into the hands of other doctors. But this is already your business. Soon your husband will leave you a widow with a huge fortune. Then we will live. And if it weren't for Riley, who called an ambulance and overheard that conversation, that's how it would have happened. When Caleb's condition stabilized, he was discharged. Riley took him to the dacha, where she continued to live with Tommy, and began to nurse the businessman back to full health. Mrs. Collins often dropped by to help with his rehabilitation. Victoria and her lover were imprisoned. Riley's husband Harry did not enjoy his careless happiness with his young mistress for long either. Evelyn soon presented him with a pregnancy test showing 2 stripes, and his dreams of freedom in life for himself slipped away. Meanwhile, Riley and Caleb grew very close while she took care of him. 2 years later they got married and soon welcomed a daughter, just as red-haired and curly as her older brother.